Hey folks, welcome to Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres, switching from automatic back to manual, and I'm joined by
Dual Ceres with twice the attacks and nothing else.
Dual Series with twice the attacks, and Thea, for those who are listening. This week we're going to talk about the Monster Manual. The new one just came out, the 2024 Monster Manual, the last of the 3-book series of the new 2024 revised rules. We'll be talking about, is it fun? Is it worth it? What do you want from a Monster Manual? How do we feel about it? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And we certainly have a certain other book to compare it to.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Alrighty, so the original Monster Manual for 5th edition was published in 2014 alongside the other books on the same staggered release schedule that we saw in 2024. Work on the new Monster Manual started in 2022 under the name Flea Mortals, kickstarted by the company MCDM. They ended up publishing it in 2024, and you don't need the new Monster Manual that's been published in 2025.
They did not publish it in 2024.
No, I think it's slightly older than that,
Yeah, for sure.
but it was kickstarted in 2022. That I
Okay.
do remember.
Well, Flea Mortals is very much like an improvement in almost every way on the Monster Manual.
Yeah, so from my perspective, to catch up the audience briefly, Flea Mortals is a supplement made by MCDM. It includes a lot of the monsters in the original Monster Manual, but sort of in an upgraded fashion. There's a few different changes that they make. The main one is to give monsters interesting actions to take during combat so that they're not as robotic and they feel more dynamic for the DM to use. And also they kind of make you feel smart because they kind of have like a bonus action that sets up the action. And then you do the bonus action, you do the action, you go, aha, I did the thing.
Yes.
They also avoid spell lists more than monsters in the official things. They have a few other rules to cover things like minions, their own take on legendary actions. And they also focus on a sort of creature design where every creature group is kind of a faction that has its different role players in combat. So you have
Yes.
like your brutes, your artillerists, your ambushers, all sorts of like different roles that different units can play in combat, and you can kind
Yeah.
of mix and match them.
And to be fair, I haven't played a lot of factions as designed.
Mhm.
I think I have mainly taken solo monsters and just taken them straight out of there.
Mhm.
Mainly for my factions that I've run in my homebrew campaign.
Mhm.
I've taken ideas and inspiration from there and then made them my own. For
Mhm.
example, the Wall Keepers, big clunky guys in armor with shields and hammers.
Mhm.
Some of their abilities were taken from kobolds,
Mhm.
little scrawny lizard people.
Mhm.
So you can already see how like made them my own is the operant word there. But I would say just by reading them, I feel like they did a very good job at creating these factions to be rounded,
Mhm.
but to maintain a sense of identity so that they don't all feel samey.
Yeah,
Because
so
if every faction has the support, the artillerist, the bruiser, and the leader, then they might end up feeling the same, and they did not. To me.
yeah, so like the way they do it, for example, for goblins, right, is that you have like a goblin assassin, and then a goblin hexer, and a goblin spine cleaver, and then a war spider, right? And so these are all different takes on like these are the goblin takes on the idea of just like a general skirmisher, a artillerist who like, or like a controller who sort of controls the battlefield from far away, an ambusher, and a brute, right? But it's like all goblin flavored. The brute is a big spider, right? The controller is like a cultist, right? And so they try to bring like the flavor of each faction into each group. And there are also certain factions like the bugbears are like more support leaning, the same with goblins are like more ambusher or skirmisher leaning.
Absolutely.
So factions do lean in certain directions. But stat blocks still fulfill individual roles. But so the reason that we mention it and bring it up is for us, that was basically the spiritual successor to the Monster Manual for 5th edition.
Yeah.
That was for us like the upgrade. And so now we get to compare it to the actual upgrade and say how we feel and what we think about it.
And I think that Flea Mortals put like concretely and professionally a lot of ideas that we already thought, that were like, why do the 5th edition monsters feel unsatisfying?
Mm-hmm.
And like things that we were already doing when we were homebrewing our monsters.
Yeah.
Like Flea Mortals simply put it in a game, like in a professional game designer way, exactly what the problems with 5e monsters are.
Yeah.
And how easy, to be honest, to fix is. Like, yeah, they made their minion rules, they have their special villain actions, but if we remove all of that, if we only go by like the raw rules of 5th edition,
Mm-hmm.
the stats blocks are still really good.
Yeah, I think, and I guess this is what something we can talk about right now. So to us, often the 5th edition monsters were unsatisfying, the ones in the 2014 Monster Manual.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that that's probably the case for many people, especially those.
That's not a hot take.
Those who've played D&D for a while. So let's talk briefly about what makes those monsters not so good, in the assumption that maybe they've been improved now that new versions of them exist.
Yeah.
So the first thing
real quick, I want to say, like, from what I know from previous editions, before we start with the negativity, 5th edition designed its monsters and its stat blocks so they would be very friendly for the dungeon master to homebrew.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, before we start tearing into them, their simplicity sometimes is an advantage for the auteur dungeon master.
Yeah, I agree. So I think, excuse me, I think the primary goal when designing 5th edition was to make something as simple to design and run as possible, right? Like in the Monster Manual, monsters are supposed to be simple. The mechanics of the classes and of the game generally are just simpler than older editions of the game, right? And I think that was one of the driving forces, right? Was to take as much pressure off of the DM as possible. And whether that always succeeded based on the flimsy or non-existent advice they tended to give you in places, I'm not sure. But the idea clearly was with monsters that they're not going to be as complicated as in previous editions. But that left you with an experience that I would say was often too simple, right? There is such a thing as too simple, and there is such a thing as complexity that doesn't add cognitive load. For example, if I have a monster and the monster has a feature, this is from Flea Mortals, but if the monster has a feature called Seize the Opening, it says 3 times per day when this monster makes an attack, it can attack with advantage. The additional cognitive load on that feature is so minimal. You immediately understand what the ability does. You immediately understand how to use it. You go into combat and you just use it, right? And so there is a level of gameplay that's just lost, right? This is something that I've heard also game designers talk about when it comes to Magic the Gathering, where when they introduced people to Magic the Gathering, they used to try to make it as simple as possible. And they would get to the end of game 1 because they were worried. They were like, look, we know Magic is a very fun game, but the hardest thing about Magic is to get people to understand the rules. So our number one goal is that by the end of game 1, they understand basically how the game works. And they dumbed the game down to that point and developed introductory products that got to that point. And there was good news and bad news. After game 1, people tended to say, did you get it? And they were like, yes, we got it. They go,
really
do you want to play again? No, it's kind of boring. And it's like, fuck, So you've simplified the fun out of the game. Yeah. But so that's what I would argue is the issue with the 2014 Monster Manual.
Because you need to know your audience to a certain degree. Like the person who will enjoy a deck building game like Magic or a tactical war game like D&D is not the person who will be excited by simplicity.
Well, I think also there's something to be said for a game being a higher complexity, and the first time you play it, it is a little overwhelming, but it's fun, and it hooks you, and it draws you in, and so you play it again and again and again until it reaches a comfortable level, or even you start moving on to more complex monsters. And D&D actually has a very natural mechanic for handling that, which is the level up system. Low-level monsters can be simpler, and high-level monsters can be more complex. But so the 2014 Monster Manual, briefly its flaws, I would say overall monster simplicity. There's a very simple algorithm to how to run every monster optimally. If you don't know it yet, this is how it goes. First off, you don't get to decide when your monster goes. Your monster just goes when it goes. So when you're told by the dice that your monster gets to go, you take your monster. First, you use any once-a-day ability. Then you use any rechargeable ability. And then you use any other abilities you have left. You always take an action if there's an action available. You always take a bonus action if there's a bonus action available. You always take a reaction when there's a reaction available. There's almost no monsters where you have to choose between multiple bonus actions, so there's some kind of strategy to, do I use this one or do I use that one? And there's very few monsters, except for a few spellcasters, where there are multiple rechargeable abilities. And so the question goes, oh, do I do this rechargeable ability first or this other rechargeable ability first, right? Where spellcasters have a few once per day abilities, or they'll have spell slots or something like that. So that's the first thing. They're just very simple to play. They go down very simply. I think another thing is they feel a little uninspired and unflavorful. Here's the ogre. It's a giant sack of hit points. Here's the hill giant. Similarly, a giant sack of hit points.
The 2014 book really didn't put in a lot of effort to make even like the base attacks of a monster would only have a base attack, make that one base attack feel like its own thing.
Yeah.
Like the way that the ogre's mace is just a mace. It's the same mace that the orc captain and that the bugbear swings. And it does this. It follows the same rules that like even a player character's mace would follow, basically.
I would say also that that happens a lot with the dragons. So the dragons in the 2014 Monster Manual are much stronger than other dragons. But essentially, in terms of the chromatic stat block, you have...
What do you mean of other monsters?
Sorry, what did I say?
I think you said other dragons.
Yeah, I think the dragons are just a ripoff. Like all the chromatic dragons are basically one stat block, right?
Yeah.
It's basically baby dragon, right? Young dragon, adult dragon, ancient dragon. Each of those is essentially a scaling version of the same stat block. There are some differences, but mostly it's like the same features just with higher numbers, right? Yeah. So not exactly inspired. And then between the chromatic versions of the dragons, the primary difference is the damage type they deal and are resistant to, which is again one variable altered. And so you have 20 stat blocks, but the amount of diversity of gameplay that is actually represented in these 20 stat blocks is minimal, right? Yeah. There's very little that separates the abilities of an ancient green dragon and an ancient white dragon in the 2014 Monster Manual. Like, it's mostly the damage type, right? Mostly, otherwise they play the same way. They both come in, they start with a giant breath weapon attack, it deals a ton of damage to you, and then they do have slightly different abilities, but like overall, it's basically a giant sack of hit points that's going to bite, claw, wing attack you or whatever, tail attack you, and then you try to hit it, and it's got like 300 hit points.
Can I explain our audience the concept of principal component analysis?
No.
Okay.
It's just like, let's just say the axis of the amount of variance that you see, and you could condense these stat blocks into a very small amount of information, right? You could create one stat block that scales between the 4 levels and has one interchangeable damage type, and you could mostly approximate what exists already with just that one stat block with a few variables in it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the things that they tried to correct in the 2024 Monster Manual. And I think in the case of the dragons, they did a good job. But like the dragons are not the only case where this applies.
Yeah, so I mean... So finishing that last point, things we find unsatisfying about the 2014 Monster Manual, static, like not very dynamic combat with many monsters.
Repetitiveness.
Yeah, repetitiveness in terms of stat blocks. I would say also the spellcasters are hard to parse with the spell slots and stuff like that. You need kind of a whole extra cheat sheet with all the spells written down, or you need to know the spells by heart.
Yeah, in general, the NPCs play a lot more like player characters, and that's just unsatisfying.
Yeah,
and difficult to run as a dungeon master. And it's weird because the NPCs don't need to play by the player's character's rules. To a certain degree, already in 2014 they didn't.
Yeah.
But the spellcasting, for some reason, is where they decided that no, this is crucial to our design.
Yeah.
We'll keep doing this.
And the problem also was often that just the casters had so many more spell slots than was reasonable than they needed for one fight. They
Yeah.
basically had the spell slots that you require for an adventuring day, but
Yeah.
they're just monsters that are going to be in one fight.
Yeah, it's like you're like, well, this guy's a ninth level caster, so he needs the spell slots of a ninth level wizard. And like, no.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so with those
Oh wait, I have one more complaint. We already mentioned, we brought up kind of orthogonal unit design in Flea Mortals.
Yeah.
The Dungeon Master, the Monster Manual did not do this.
Yeah.
To a large degree, monsters of the same faction would be like slight variation on the same stat block or scaling up version of the scale of the same.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, oh, here's the goblin that makes one attack and can escape as a bonus action. Here's the tough goblin with twice as many hit points. It makes 2 attacks and it can escape as a bonus action. Right? Neither one of these is the skirmisher or the brute. They both fulfill exactly the same role. Fights against this faction are going to be samey, and it basically just depends on the character level whether or not you're going to use tough goblin or goblin to fight them.
Yeah.
All right, so 10 years of experience and whatnot under their belt. In 2024 and 2025, they released the new rules and the updated Monster Manual. We've had it now for a few days. I've been feverishly producing a CSV file that I can use for combat and counter builders and stuff like that, which I will link in the description. And
All very normal behavior, no obsessions here.
Yeah, it only took me 4 days, or 5 days. So that's done. I completed that, and so I've had an opportunity to look at a few of the monsters. You've had an opportunity to look at a few of the monsters.
Yes, I have thoughts.
So overall, I would say, what are your opinions on the 2024 Monster Manual? What are just your opening thoughts?
So my opening thoughts are much like the other books of the 2024 edition. Mostly upgrades, but definitely not enough. And they're not willing to change some core things to the way that they design things that in the long run just hurts them. It's like they're dragging this boulder behind it. Maybe painful to rip it off, but then we can start running. And that's how I feel about it. And it's not even like Flea Mortal doesn't exist. Flea Mortal exists. We have the template for how to do the better version of this. And they refuse to do it.
Well, I think the thing with Flea Mortals, though, that does have to be emphasized and stated at some point, is that Flea Mortals can be overly complex, right? And Flea Mortals is designed for a niche audience. Somebody who plays D&D enough to go, man, these monsters are boring me. I want some new stuff to throw at my players. But not just new random monsters. I want to redo the classic fantasy tropes, but do them better, right? I never used this goblin stat block. Give me a goblin stat block I might actually use that I don't need to homebrew myself. And I find that, they can be overly complex. Like especially if you're like a newer player, right? A newer DM, it's not really where I would recommend you start.
No, I mean, minions, his villain rules, villain actions, abilities, special rules for like companion monsters that are allowed to join the party, followers, that kind of stuff. That can be all scrapped. Even I find that was a little like some of that stuff is like excessive. Like we don't need that to fix the game. But as I said before, if you look at like the standard 5e combat rules, and like many of those stat blocks work so well, and not every stat block needs to be as complicated as a Flea Mortal stat block. But like when we start getting in the upper echelons of the game, or even as soon as we get out of tier of the first 2-3 levels, like when we're fighting CR3 monsters, that's when the complexity should kick in to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? And you need options, right? I think Flea Mortals to me is the quintessence of like the New Game Plus experience, right? It's you've played this game, you've played a campaign already, and now you're starting again at level 1 or 3 or whatever, and now you want to run a goblin fight, and it's after having just ran your homebrew Galthanox the Shadow Demon campaign ending encounter fight, running a goblin that literally has like run, attack, and then hide as a bonus action, and that's literally all the stat block does. You kind of look at this and you're like, wow, this is really dry. There's no meat on this bone, right? Then that's what I think Flea Mortals is for. But I think if you're starting out, the Goblin Shadow is going to confuse you. The Goblin Assassin is going to confuse you. The darkness rules and how those work exactly are going to confuse you as a new player. So I think Flea Mortals could never have been used as a one-to-one template, but it never was supposed to be, right?
No.
It's its own product. But I do think Flea Mortals gives a convincing idea for how you can design like CR6 and above creatures, right? Like I think as of that point, a CR6 creature, you're going to be fighting probably around 6th level at the earliest, at like 4th level. Right?
Even I would say even a CR3 creature, like a CR3 creature is meant to be a normal encounter for a 3rd level party.
But don't you find that no, a CR3 creature is an easy encounter.
It's an easy encounter
for a 3rd level party. But like, don't
what I'm saying is basically like,
don't you find that could be overwhelming for like a new DM, right? Like
maybe, but I feel like the new DM, the new player, doesn't start at level 3. They start at level 1.
Yeah.
And our monsters at level 1 and 2, we fight easy monsters. Our goblin, our CR 1/8 goblin doesn't need an exciting bonus action.
Yeah.
But like once the players are level 3, they either have fought their way through levels 1 and 2, or we're starting at level 3, which I assume means we're experienced.
I totally agree with that. So the new player's handbook says, if you're experienced with D&D already, you should start campaigns at level 3. And if you are not, you should play at level 1, which means level 1 and 2 are explicitly tutorial levels, right? For new players to sink their teeth into, get a hold for the game. What is this whole TTRPG business? What is this whole dungeoning and dragonizing, right? And they figure out their stuff. And then as of level 3 is kind of in quotation marks, where for experienced players, the real game begins, right? And real in quotation marks there. Yeah. But so that's for me exactly the opportunity. The divide between monsters you might face at 3rd level and at 2nd level, I think actually should be a big one. It should feel like a big step up because as of 3rd level, it's sort of more for the more experienced players. Yeah. And I would also say that you can trust the DM more, because I feel the DM can actually modulate the complexity that they face. For example, right, a DM can choose one monster type to run in a combat. Often you run 2 just because you want something interesting to do. But if you already have a very interesting monster stat block, then you can just run, like, there's just 7 of these goblin assassins in this room. 7 is a lot for a low-level party. Don't do that. But, there's 4 shadow assassins in this room, and that's the whole fight. There's nobody else, right? And so, like, if the shadow assassin feels complex to you, that's how you run it. If the shadow assassin doesn't feel complex to you, then you run 2 shadow assassins and 2 bugbears, right? Or something like that, Yeah. But I would also say on top of this, I disagree with the premise that the Flea Mortals design that is complex for low-level monsters is the only way to create action-oriented low-level creatures, right? Like I was saying earlier with the, like, seize the opening ability, or with a bonus action that lets you dash, right? It's a very simple feature, right? I mean, just imagine on your normal goblin stat block, and then with a bonus action, you can dash.
Yeah.
How much additional cognitive load is that really?
Not at all.
I think it's basically none, but the DM gets to feel like they're doing something, right? Well, I get to attack and I get to move. Does it matter that the movement is not really mostly relevant? No, it doesn't actually, right? It's just, it makes the game slightly more fun.
Add that to the goblin's base movement speed and save yourself the words.
Absolutely. And we've talked about this before.
Yes.
The Monster Manual often simplifies and shorthands things that could be abilities. It just combines and melds into individual features. That's why in the 2014 Monster Manual, there's almost no bonus actions, because anything that would be a bonus action is just included as part of the multi-attack wording or included as part of the attack.
Or a clunkily worded ability.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the Monster Manual didn't have bonus actions in, like, the action section.
Yeah.
There just weren't there. If
there were traits that said, like, as a bonus action, they can do this.
Which was seemed like at some point early on in the design they had said, we are not going to give our monsters bonus actions to keep it simple. And then they were like, but bonus actions are so cool, though.
And ended up adding some. Yeah, I could see that happening.
Like, do you want to go into specifics now?
But one thing I want to mention is, like, in Flea Mortals, there's a trait that the ogre stat block has, which is when they're at half health, they get resistance to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage. Publishing damage.
But
what WotC takes every time they break the OGL.
I was about to say, like, Hasbro, every time they open their goddamn mouths, they take publishing damage.
But so it's a fun resistance, right? And it's just something you get to narrate. When the ogre gets to half health, you get to go, oh, it flies into a rage, and now it's resistant to all of these attacks. Honestly, you could very easily just convert that trait into additional hit points. The complexity of the monster would go down. But the point of that feature is obviously not to add complexity. It's just a little wrinkle that makes it more interesting, right? It's the difference between simple and bland, right? And so...
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, high-level balance changes I should mention briefly. I got most of these insights from like Blog of Holding, but there's others. And we'll put them in the description. Yeah, check the links in the description. But basically, monsters have the same amount of hit points as they did before, except for at high levels of play, where they have significantly more. Monsters deal more damage across all tiers of play, but they do a lot more damage at high tiers of play. They basically have +1 AC all across the board, and their initiative scores, like their initiative bonuses, now scale as they level. So that means as time goes on, monsters will be further and further ahead in initiative order. We were going to talk about
the older rules. This initiative, like they did the initiative bonus, by the book, where they just took the dexterity score, and then if there was a special trait, then maybe it would increase by a little bit. But now monsters regularly have proficiency or even expertise in an initiative. So it's just funny. They still do it by the book. It's like, oh no. There's a mechanical reason why the bonus is so high. Like, man, just write in the high number.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I agree with you. I am in the camp that I don't think monster stat blocks need to make sense, and especially if you're designing or homebrewing your own, I would recommend giving the scimitar of your bandit the damage die you want it to be, and giving them the damage bonus you want it to be. I find this when I write effects. I'm often like, this monster's attack, it should be 3d6. And I'm like, yeah, but what if I roll 3 1s? And I'm like, that's right. Ceres, you clever fox, it's a 7 plus 1d6. And I do that regularly because like I don't like the variance, right? And it's like, why? No reason. Like there's no mechanical reason for why this is the case, right? It just is the case. I just find that a distribution between 8 and 13 is more satisfying for my players than a distribution between 3 and 18.
Yeah. Or you want your goblin hunter to have a reach of 10 feet because it's using like a spear.
Yeah.
But you want the damage to be a 1d4, and there isn't such a weapon in the player's handbook, but too bad.
Or a classic one for me was like, I want this monster to feel really dexterous, so I'm going to give it a dexterity of +4. Oh, but now it's got a +6 attack modifier. That's too high? I used to agonize about that. Now I would just write +4 in the box. Sue me. You know? I don't know. It's not proficient with the weapon or whatever.
Don't make me tap the sign. The dungeon master can do whatever they want.
Exactly, right? But so anyways, we're getting a little bit off track. But yeah, so now we have the 2024 Player's Handbook in front of us.
Yeah.
You felt mostly good about it, like it was a marginal improvement, but improvement nonetheless.
Yeah, I still have a lot of the complaints that I don't know. Still have a lot of complaints, and I don't know if it would be worth for me to spend money on this, like those marginal improvements, considering how much I homebrew.
Yeah.
So,
I do think you're a unique case, though. You homebrew essentially all of your monsters.
Yes, I am an auteur. Thank you for recognizing that.
I don't like homebrewing monsters at all. I don't know why. It's just annoying to me and tiresome and anxiety provoking because like, oh, is this going to be broken or whatever? I want a simple menu that I want to be inspired, right? I want that. I prefer the combat creation process, like reading through the monster manual, reading through Flea Mortals. I want that to be the process that makes my preparing of the adventure easier. Because I go, oh, this is a fun monster, and oh, what's this say in the flavor text? Oh, this monster does like this. Cool, yeah, I could build a little room I could build a room of this dungeon around that, or I could build like, I just have it on the brain.
I like mining the stat blocks for ideas.
Yeah.
So I like opening up Flea Mortals, finding a faction that shares a little bit of DNA with mine.
Yeah.
And go like, see what these kobolds have. Oh, they have a cool shield bash attack. Interesting. I'll take the shield bash.
Yeah, and I prefer to just draw them off the list. My opening feelings with the 2024 Monster Manual is that there are improvements, and that in many ways this is better than the 2014 Monster Manual, but I also find that it is somewhat hit and miss. Like there are stat blocks that I think are really cool and really interesting.
Yes.
And stat blocks that I think to myself, what was going on the day that this was added to the Monster Manual, you know? So,
Yeah. It was hot dog day. And the
exactly.
designer was like, if I don't get downstairs and get in line for my hot dog,
Yeah,
then there won't be any hot dogs left. And that's how the Modron stat blocks were written.
exactly. So I want to talk about, I actually have a specific stat block in mind that I want to talk about.
All right, let's take a look.
Before we get into specific stat blocks, and this is a specific stat block I want to highlight for being good and cool. I do want to say the new stat block format that they've used is better. This Monster Manual has more stat blocks than the 2014. I think that's kind of uncontroversially an improvement. Better organized stat blocks and more readable stat blocks are also an uncontroversial improvement. I also find the organization by alphabet instead of by monster family also a pretty big improvement. I know we had a little bit of controversy. You didn't quite agree with that. But those are kind of things that, like, I don't know, like, yeah. So let's get into actual stat blocks and talk about, like, some of these designs. So I want to talk about the troll.
Hey.
Trolls have a special place in my heart in D&D. I can remember the first time I ever fought a troll. I was completely flabbergasted by the idea that it just permanently regenerates. Not only did this get like my whole like mad scientist biology brain ticking, like what happens if you cut off the head, and does the head grow back and the body grow back? And what if you divide it exactly evenly? And what if you cut off like this part of it and you stick it on the other part? Or what happens if it's in a vat of acid and it's just continuously dissolving? The answer is the regeneration doesn't work in acid. But I didn't know this at the time when I was fighting them, you know? So I thought they were super interesting. We killed them like 3 times before we figured it out. Like we killed them and they would fall down on the ground and we're like, oh cool, they're dead. And then we'd walk away and do stuff and they jump up and they're regenerated and they start.
It's the Hercules Hydra scene when he cuts off the head, walks away, and then the body starts moving, and then the head, 3 heads grow out of the body. The Disney one, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Well, really?
No.
Interesting.
I have a sneaking suspicion I haven't actually seen this movie. But maybe I have. I remember so little of my life.
What makes you... Okay. Interesting.
Because I remember Hades.
Yeah.
I remember Hades and I remember his monologues, but I don't remember much else. I don't remember the end of the movie you talked to me about with the elementals, like the giants walking towards Olympus.
Yeah, the most unsatisfying climax ever. I love that movie for many reasons. Like, good storytelling is...
Yeah.
Anyways,
so here's the
trolls.
Thing. Trolls are interesting because there's basically no way to defeat them without understanding them. And that's really cool, right? You got to figure out the trick with trolls that you have to figure out as a player is you need fire or acid. I think maybe poison as well.
2.
Acid or fire. So when I played it, it was also poison. Like in the adventure I played, it was also poison. But yeah, fire and acid looks like what it's the official damage types. Otherwise, they keep regenerating permanently. And that was the case in the 2014 Monster Manual. But in the 2024 Monster Manual, we get an additional little wrinkle, which I think is very interesting. They now have an ability called Loathsome Limbs. They can use it 4 times a day. If the troll ends any turn bloodied, so at half health, and took 15 plus slashing damage during the turn, so that's something you kind of need to keep track of, one of the troll's limbs is severed, falls into the troll space, and becomes a troll limb. The limb acts immediately after the troll's turn. It has 1 exhaustion level for each missing limb, so eventually it'll die when it reaches 6, and it grows replacement limbs the next time it regains hit points. And the troll limb is a whole other stat block of its own that also regenerates. And I think this is a really fun, interesting twist. This is a monster I would love to throw at my players, right? This would surprise them. First off, if they've never faced a troll before, they might be surprised by the whole regeneration stick. But then when the arms start crawling and chasing after you, I think that's really fun. And I think that's a really fun and interesting design. And the troll, I should note, by the way, because I think some people might make the argument, oh, well, they only made the low CR creatures simple and the high CR creatures are all complex, right? And so that's them respecting the gradient of growth that you go through as you experience the game more and more. You become more and more comfortable with more complex. I would like to note, for the record, the troll is a CR5 creature. All right, this is that's pretty really low cool. CR. This is something you could face at 3rd level and fight. Like a team of 4 to 6 adventurers could fight a troll at 5th level and could win. Yeah. It might be a tough fight, but this is something that could happen essentially right out of the gate, right? And speaking of stat blocks I don't like as much,
Oh,
You
where are
could
you bringing
compare
me?
this to the Grick. The Grick has an AC of 14.
Oh, what's a Grick?
A Grick is like a tentacle monster. It's got a big beak, 4 face tentacles, and then a long serpentine tail, and it hides
Yeah.
in hidden places.
I must say, octopi have beaks.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct, and I see where the beaks come from.
Mm-hmm.
I think that D&D's idea of putting beaks on tentacle monsters is misguided.
A Grick has an AC of 14. It has 54 hit points. It has 1 skill, which is stealth, plus 4. It has multi-attack. It attacks once with its beak and once with its tentacles. Its beak deals 9 damage. Its tentacles deal 7 damage, and then grapple a creature.
I see there's an ancient Greek. Ancient Greek.
Yes, there's an ancient Grick.
There's an ancient Greek.
So
I think they made it on purpose.
Just first,
Yeah.
Grick, how do we feel about this stat block?
We don't.
We don't.
We
right?
don't feel.
This is a CR2 creature that does the exact same thing on every single turn, and it's not particularly interesting. It hits you once, it bites you once, and then it grabs you. And then it bites you again, and it grabs you, right?
Yeah.
That's literally all it does, is bite and grab.
At the very least, it inflicts a condition. Like, it grapples you.
Yeah, it grapples you.
Which is
So,
more than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that's like salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this dish doesn't taste like nothing. It tastes like salt.
Mhm.
All right, the Grick Ancient, which is a CR7 creature. So this is 2 CR above the troll.
This is
So,
the first time.
Again, complexity argument kind of goes out of the window here.
This is the first time I've read an ancient creature being referred to as like Greek ancient and not ancient Greek, and I think that's specifically because it sounds like ancient Greek.
Maybe I have heard like blank ancient before, but it is rare than ancient whatever. Like it's a D&D ism more than an English ism.
Okay.
All right, the Grick Ancient now has plus 6 stealth, has
Yeah.
155 hit points, AC of 18. It still has the beak attack and the tentacle attack, and added to it, it has a slam attack, which can knock somebody prone. So I guess the cool gimmick here is if you knock somebody prone and you grapple them, then they can't stand up from being grappled anymore. They can't stand up from being prone anymore because they no longer have a movement speed because they're grappled, which means you get advantage on your future attacks.
That's what you want at CR7.
And that's the full complexity of
At
the
this
monster.
point, the party is casting fireballs and hasting themselves.
Absolutely. Like a creature you're fighting at CR7, right? It's an easy fight.
Mhm.
So like if you're fighting multiple Grick Ancients, then you're at least 7th level, which means you're like casting Banishment, you're casting Haste, you're casting Greater Invisibility, right? And, or I guess, what's the Summon Minor Elementals, the new broken spell?
The new broken spell that will be a Ratad.
I'm sure. Or if you're fighting this at lower level, this could be a good boss monster if you're like maybe 5th level or something like that. At which point you're still casting like Fireball and Haste and stuff like that.
That's what I'm saying. At fifth, if you're fighting this at 5th level, which is like probably the bottom, like the lowest level you can fight this, and that is not boss.
Yeah, so that's why I feel like this monster manual is kind of hit and miss, right? There's moments of what I find are like genuine brilliance, like really cool monster design, which is like the troll, and then moments where it's just like you read it and you think to yourself, got it, I'm never going to use this, right? Like I actually, our party, I'm DMing for our party, and our party's about to go underground on an underground mission into an ancient ruin. And so when I read that Gricks were worms that hunt the dark and decaying, I thought, hey, maybe I should use a Grick. Those are cool. Those are always on the monster manual. I wonder what they do. And I looked it up and I read it and I went, got it. I'm not making room for this in my dungeon.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just doesn't even justify the work it would need for me to write up the random room that you find this thing in.
Yeah.
You know? It's just going to be more interesting if I pick a different monster that's better and make a room about that monster.
Yeah. I think I think they really underestimate like the opportunity cost that you give up every time you pick a monster, then you're not running something else.
Yeah.
And because this game is not like a computer generated game where you can simply click 3 times and you have your encounter, you need to actually put in work and effort.
Yeah.
Some like it's not that fighting a Grick is something that I hate. But like I will never, as you said, I will create my own Grick stat block before I pick this, because at least I will spend 2.5 hours of combat encounter having a good time.
Yeah. It's like imagine a world class restaurant, right? The 4th best thing on the menu is probably not anything anybody's ordering. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because you're at a world-class restaurant. So
Yeah.
you're going to get the thing that they're known for, right?
Yeah.
And the fourth best thing is probably not the thing that they're known for. So it's not that it's so far down the list, but it's just the opportunity cost, as you said, is huge, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just literally never going to use it probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that is unfortunate. I have another monster that I want to highlight as positive.
Good.
Okay. So this is a change not in stat block, but in lore.
Oh.
And this is with the Sphinxes. I found this in the old 2014 Monster Manual, and I did not like it. And in the new Monster Manual, they've addressed it, and I do like it. The Sphinxes represent two important changes. The first is there are now more Sphinx stat blocks than ever. And there's little cute Sphinxes that are like baby Sphinxes that are CR1, and then there's like a little bit bigger Sphinxes that are CR8 and CR11, and finally like an Omega Sphinx that is CR17. So I think that's cool, just from the standpoint that there's more Sphinxes now. I think they're cool, and you can use them. I like the artwork and the concept. But also, I don't know if you know this, but the Sphinx of Secrets used to be called the Gyno Sphinx.
Because women are mysterious.
And was the woman Sphinx,
Yes.
Sphinx basically. And the Andro Sphinx was or there was an Andro Sphinx.
Which now is the Valor Sphinx.
Which is now the Sphinx of Lore.
Because men are tough and strong.
And if you look at the Sphinx of Secrets and the Sphinx of Lore, you might notice one is CR8 and one is CR11. Because just like the Andro Sphinx was just literally a better monster than the Gyno Sphinx.
A little stronger. I found the Gyno Sphinx a better monster because it was more interesting to run.
Sure. But so I appreciate that like the needless gendering of monsters has been slightly reduced by introducing just two Sphinxes that have a different focus. And especially also with like the Succubus and Incubus.
The Succubus and Incubus was weird because they had kind of like already taken half a step in making the Succubus, the Incubus actually the same monster.
Yeah.
But they didn't go the full way in just saying like, if it's the same monster, why are there two names for it? And why are there only two versions of it? What about the non-binary version of this thing? What are we calling this? The Anubis?
Yeah, so I like that about the Sphinxes. It's something brief I wanted to point out. Their stat blocks are also cool, but like not so cool that I would specifically shout them out. But it's just like we have like some spell casting, we have some multi-attack, we have some things that you could do instead of multi-attack. There's some rechargeable abilities on the Sphinx of Lore and some interesting legendary actions, right? So it's like nothing crazy, but it's just something I wanted to point out. Do you have a monster you want that you particularly liked?
Honestly, I think that I liked a lot I have improvements in art that I would like. There's some that I will highlight later when I'll talk about the art. But now I also want to talk about more the design of the game. And like I will start with half a praise, half a critique. So there's a design idea here in this monster, which is for every family of monster that is big enough, they have introduced the idea that they wanted to have like a final boss monster of that category.
Yeah.
For the oozes, we have
so there's like for what all categories? It's like for the monstrosities, we have the Tarrasque. For the oozes, we have a new one.
For the constructs, we have the Colossus.
Right. For the constructs, there's a new one.
And
there's a new high level Sphinx. I think the Andro Sphinx was the CR11 stat block, so I think the Sphinx of Valor is just 17. Brand new.
Yeah.
There's also the Vampire, Umbral Lord, right? That one that they kept saying in the promotional materials.
Yeah, exactly. And,
is there any other one? Is there like a high-level aberration that there wasn't there before or something like that?
There is something interesting. It's not a high-level aberration. It's a high-level plant.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that it's a good idea, generally, to develop these factions and groups a little bit more, so that if the dungeon master says, I like these guys, but I have only 2 stat blocks here, so if I want to make an adventure about this, I need to homebrew the whole shebang. But I think that they got kind of lost in assumptions, and like in what it means to build like out a faction so that you could build up to a climactic boss fight.
Oh, the Elemental Cataclysm.
The Elemental Cataclysm, because
they also added a new high level
Elemental. Didn't have Elemental bosses before.
Yeah, there were like some in supplementary, but not in the main Monster Manual. There was like the Zaraton and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We have 4, one for each element, which feels better than just having a big mush.
Yeah.
So so here, they also they develop basically an entire ecosystem of fungi.
Yeah.
With a boss, and So I want to bring us to a classic faction D. Let's go back to basics. Bandits. So our bandits here. Before in the Monster Manual 2014, we had your bandit stat block and your bandit captain stat block.
Yeah,
Your bandit was CR 1/2. The bandit captain was CR 2.
Arguably, also in the old Monster Manual, most of the humanoid, like hobgoblins and orcs, could stand in well as bandit stat blocks.
Yeah.
Which, like, orcs have been removed from the new Monster Manual, and the humanoid stat blocks that are left in the Monster Manual have been generified.
Yes.
Have been made more generic so that you can basically use them for anything, right?
You want like elf berserkers.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
You just have this berserker stat block that you can use for anything, which I do appreciate in a sense, that over having like, oh, here's evil drow, and here's evil orcs, and here's evil this, and here's evil that, instead just sort of focusing on like the grouping. Because especially if you run a setting where lineages intermix a lot, you'll find yourself in a city going, well, I don't really want to use the drow matron here. It's just a little too specific. I just need like high-level assassin or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a whole conversation, a whole episode to be said, but I think that generally there is this tension between like the deep flavor, where it's like, oh yeah, these are my orcs. These are my barbarian, raging orcs.
And nomads. They do groom lore-specific stuff and stuff like that.
Exactly. And then there is the kind of modern fantasy take on all of this, which is kind of what you described. And the tension, and there is this tension because, like, sadly, a lot of that flavor comes from like a place that we don't like anymore culturally. Yeah. But we still feel like that flavor is the right one. It's the one that makes us kind of perk up and be like, oh yeah, that's the sauce. Yeah,
I mean, in general, specific beats general.
Yeah.
But in this specific case, I feel general beats specific. What a sentence! But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you know what you mean, listener? Email us at friendlyorbit@gmail.com.
If you know what I mean, email us at friendlyorbit@gmail.com.
So bandits.
Tell me about the critique or you had for the bandit.
So we have the bandit and the bandit captain stat block are still here. I still think that these two stat blocks suffer from the same kind of sameness syndrome, where the bandit captain has like the real difference is that the bandit captain has a parry reaction.
Yeah, so there's like a 50 to 75% overlap between the bandit and the bandit captain stat block. So it kind of makes you wonder about wasted page space in a way.
Yeah, like the bandit captain doesn't do anything interesting with like commanding, doesn't have any leader abilities. Yeah. So
it's kind of like, imagine a spice cabinet filled with chili powder, cayenne pepper, paprika, and chili flakes. And you think to yourself, technically these are at 4 or 5 different spices, but in actuality, in terms of the different things I could cook, I can mostly, like, all the things you could cook with chili powder, I can probably cook with these other things. You know what I mean?
Imagine a Dutch cheese shop. It's Gouda. It's green Gouda, orange Gouda, red Gouda, and blue Gouda.
Okay, that's for the Dutch audience. They're just going absolutely wild right now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're Captain America-ing all over. I got that.
Hey, Nereid.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Nereid.
Yeah, so what CR are these stat blocks? CR 1/8, CR 2. This is a solid.
So for low-level characters?
Exactly. Then we get the Bandit Deceiver. When I saw this, I perked up because I thought, oh, okay, orthogonal unit design. I bet that the Bandit Deceiver is not going to be a brute who hits really hard. That's correct. I see spellcasting, I see disguise self, I see mage hand, hold person, mage armor, major image, blinding flash as an ability. There's a dagger, but that's okay. Every monster.
The deceiver is like a caster, basically.
Exactly, it's a caster. It's an illusionist. But I kind of saw hold person, level 4 version, level 4 hold person. Damn, this bandit hits hard. And then I see the CR, CR 7.
So same as the Grick, by the way. So just mentally, briefly, just to make my point again, while you're making your point, just compare those mentally in complexity.
And finally, we arrive at the Bandit Crime Lord, the CR 11. Boss of the bandit faction, with the evasion trait, the cool actions of scimitar,
Mm-hmm.
and pistol.
Ah.
Yeah. And bonus action, deadly aim, which she uses to get advantage on the next attack roll and deal extra poison damage. So first, CR11 boss
Yeah.
is this. This is Captain Plus, like the same way that the Captain is a upgrade on the bandit, but like not
the names are often not what the names imply. Like
Exactly.
this bandit crime lord doesn't have any skills that specifically make it good at being a leader, at being a crime lord, right? This is just like a powerful bandit is the way that you should read it, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if it just said bandit, strong bandit, very strong bandit, Titanic bandit, right? Or something. You'd be like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So like small rock, medium rock, big rock were the elementals.
Yeah.
And so, but that's one critique. But here, the critique that I noticed the most are the huge CR gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are they thinking? We will run this campaign that climaxes in fighting a bandit, or do they think that bandits will be our enemies when we are CR7?
Like, I think the idea is basically that either you need a high-level bandit to throw at, like, an 8th level party or something, and this will somehow surprise them or be cool or interesting, or maybe, like, maybe even a 7th level party, right? Or, right, the idea is this is in the 18th level, like, in the 18th level combat, you just, like, throw in 7 of these. Because these are like the henchmen of so-and-so, right? And you don't run them like bandit crime lords. You just run them like high-level bandits that are actually threatening. You know what I mean? Like you say, this is the evil party of adventurers that's submitted to Sauron's rule. And so you got to fight them and Sauron at the same time. So there's like 8 of them and 1 Sauron. And then it's a challenge for your 18th level party or something like that.
Sure. Here's my take.
Mm-hmm.
It's a boss monster.
Mm-hmm.
You fight boss monsters at a big level, so make numbers big.
Maybe.
But bandits, you fight at low level, so make their numbers low. And then you end up with this insanely designed faction, where basically...
You go from 1/4 to 2 to 7 to 11.
Exactly. And, like, I think that it should just be normalized that, like, the boss, the bandit crime lord, can be a CR5 or 6 boss for an adventure of 10 sessions that goes from level 1 to 4.
Yeah.
And that's the climax.
Yeah, like I think it should be normal that factions have their range, right? Like bandit factions only become so difficult to fight because they're just bandits at the end of the day,
and
right?
is it gonna be interesting to go?
Like it's cool to have like another paladin stat block that's CR11. You can imagine how a paladin might become so powerful, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like, what is the bandit lord specifically doing that is getting them so juiced up? Right?
Exactly. And
I think the issue is also partially D&D is a game with 20 levels. And so the math scales, the power level scales so crazily, right? And they kind of need to support all tiers of play in the Monster Manual. And therefore, they need a CR11 bandit for you to be able to do any kind of bandit storyline as of 8th level, right? And so they have to make the CR11 bandit. But if the whole game actually like started at 1st level, if you're like a newbie, and then 3rd level if you're experienced, and then you are only supposed to play until like 12th or 14th level, then you wouldn't need that extra high level bandit stat block. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but also, do we need to design bandits for like a level 7 or 8th party for this to be like a boss fight?
Well,
like,
I think
bandits are not designed for that. It's like if, I don't know, it's like if we had CR16 goblins. Like, it's such a niche idea that if somebody wants to run goblins at CR16, they will do it. But most people don't need that, and I feel like this is a bad stat block. This is my bandit crime, not just because it's poorly designed, but because it's scaled for a complexity that I feel like 1 in 50 games will feature this bandit crime lord. It will probably require homebrew.
I mean, like, so in a vacuum, I find it hard to say, like, does the game need this? I think, why not? Why not have a hard, like, what if you run into a situation where you have a high-level bandit and you want them to be relevant, right? Even if they're just helping the party or something, but you want an NPC to have a stat block, right? And you don't want to write it yourself. What I think the correct argument against that is the opportunity cost,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, well, but because you have a CR11 bandit in here, you don't have another interesting, say, CR7 goblin or something like that.
Yeah, or just these are presented as a faction, as if you're supposed to kind of use them together. These 4 stat blocks are.
I think that's your assumption. I think
I don't
D&D
know.
is still on a simpler level where they're like, all of these stat blocks start with B. Here's the bandits. You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe they put the title bandits on it. It's
I
not
know,
just-
but I don't think that in D&D, like, at least in 5th edition, I don't think the assumption is that you find a faction and you go, oh, I'm going to run multiple of these stat blocks together, right?
Yeah.
Like with the dragons, you're not supposed to run multiple of the dragons together. The idea is simply, here it is. How do you run it together? I'll just grab these and any other random monster from them. Like, that's how they tell you to make combats in the DMG. They say, pick 2 monsters, basically, and run them together. They say combats, they're like the easiest way to make a combat. It's basically to take 2 different kinds of monsters, like hellhounds and fire giants. You put them together and you do a fight, right?
Yeah. And by the way, blights, same situation with plants. For some reason, they wanted to. Well, not for some reason. As I said, good idea. Have a boss plant monster if you want to make a creepy plant, like cursed plant campaign. So you have your twig blight, your needle blight, your vine blight, and I think twig blight, needle blight, and vine blight are very well designed orthogonal monsters. Twig blight is your minion who runs up to you. The needle blight is your artillery. Vine blight is controller who grapples and blocks. Then you have, and these are like CR 1/8, 1/4, and 1.5.
So you could run them together easily.
Exactly. Then we have our bruiser, our tree blight, CR 7.
So you just can't run this with the other like stat blocks. It's just not going to work.
And
I mean, I think that's actually a little bit of what you said about modern fantasy and old fantasy, right? That's what you're seeing at play here, right? The MCDM approach, where there is a brute goblin, right, and it's a big spider. There's also another brute goblin that's just a tough goblin, right? That assumes that basically your lineage, your physiology doesn't define you. Every faction, it partially defines you, right? Goblins lean a certain way, but you can still find casters in the goblin faction.
I mean, the brute goblin doesn't have as many hit points as the hobgoblin.
Brute, right? Yeah, exactly. But like, you know what I mean? So it's like the idea is that the faction still has a lot of diversity within it. Whereas what you're seeing in this monster manual is much more like classic fantasy, where your physiology defines who you are. If you want a ambusher to run with your tree blight in the CR7 fight, pick any other stat block in the monster. Go find a CR7 ambushing stat block, then come up for a reason why these 2 might team up together. Maybe just because they're better together. That's like the easiest reason you could come up with for why they team up together, right?
Yeah.
But it's like basically the idea is that Flea Mortals is a little bit like, well, any faction will have their brute and their caster and their artillerist and their leader, right? Whereas in the Monster Manual, they say, no, factions are defined by what they are, and therefore they generally, right, fulfill one role. And if you want to mix and match combat roles, then you combine different factions together in interesting ways.
Yeah. Anyway, the boss monster of the plants, the Gulthias Blight, is CR16.
Yeah. Which you can't run with any of the other ones.
You can't run, exactly. So, like,
I mean, maybe you could run like a Gulthias Blight and a Tree Blight together with as like a boss with minions scenario, but like.
But yeah, so the Gulthias Blight here, it cannot, like, you're selling me here on the idea that there are these blights, and then there's a boss, and I can write an adventure about these blights and this boss, which, by the way, the Gulthias Blight spawns them. It's literally their mother.
Yeah.
But it's a lie. I can't.
Like, you can't, you would really have to skip a lot of content to go from CR 1/4 stat blocks to CR 16 stat blocks.
But at the very least here, the units are orthogonally designed, and this is another thing that I want to talk about, opportunity cost. It's so much easier for me as a dungeon master to take these blights and like make numbers go big.
Yeah.
And match the Gulthias Blight. It's so much harder for me, or for a newer dungeon master especially, to take a faction with small goblin, medium goblin, big goblin, who all have the same abilities, and to come up with new inventive ways to differentiate them and make them orthogonal. So that's another thing with the opportunity cost.
Yeah, like to strain the spice analogy, right? Yeah. If you have a spice cabinet with cayenne pepper in it, you can figure out pretty easily what less cayenne pepper and what more cayenne pepper is, right? Yeah. But inventing cumin takes creativity, right? Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can we talk about the Modrons? I really want to
Yeah,
talk about the Modrons at some point on this
I
episode.
wanted to transition in, and now would you like to talk about Modrons?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
to put the button, actually I have one more thing about factions, but like a
Say
positive
it.
example.
Tell me.
Well, I think that undead
Mm-hmm.
like show how you do the the flavorful faction that spawns all tiers of play.
Mm-hmm.
You can run an entire campaign on undead. You can fight nothing but undead.
Yeah.
And this game provides you with like solid options at every level,
Yeah.
solid mini bosses to build up. They even made a 2 stat blocks for the Death Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Death Knight is a classic boss. If it's not a Lich, it's probably a Death Knight.
Yeah.
And like there's like basically a Death Knight apprentice, or basically like Death Knight in
Aspirant.
progress.
Yeah,
Aspirant,
yeah.
Exactly. And like I looked at that and I was like, yeah, I can. There's a huge gap between the Aspirant Death Knight and the Death Knight, but because the undead are such a big faction, basically it's an entire class of monsters that count as the same faction.
Yeah.
Then you can actually pull it off from CR 1/8 to CR20.
And
all on death.
I find it's a very inspiring and very fun way to build campaigns, is to pick a monster type and run with it. The first campaign, actually, that I ever wrote, that I ever designed and played, I was like, hey, that's funny.
Was it ours?
No. I was like, hey, goblinoids. Like, goblinoids, there's lots of different goblinoids.
Yeah.
There's all these different kinds of goblinoids. And if you squint, giants are kind of also like goblinoids, and you could kind of subsume them into it, right? And it's like under the
troll is kind of like the transition point.
Exactly. And it's like under the charismatic leadership of a hobgoblin villain, you could create an entire army of these sort of mundane-ish, sort of non-planar monsters and make a whole big thing out of it, right? The second campaign I ran was based on Tyranny of Dragons, so it was like dragon-centric, so you can see sort of where I'm coming from. Like, oh, well, I'll have you fight like wormlings and kobolds at lower levels, and then like, you know, at higher levels we'll have you fighting like wyverns and like mid-tier stuff, and then in the late game, obviously it's it's dragon o'clock, you know?
Yeah.
So I do think that it's an interesting, and you can't really do it so well with the Monster Manual. You really have to pick a broad category.
Exactly.
Like, even if you pick fiends, you're not going to get there because the fiends are too high level. So you kind of...
Also, lore-wise, I feel like you have to start... You can start with the cultists.
Well, I feel like starting with fiends is actually fun. Like, I feel like people overdo how strong fiends are. I think, like, the trope of they open a portal and 27 tiny fiends jump out and they're all like, nah! And they try to eat you, and you, like, kill them and you're, like, level 3 adventurers. That works for me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can do it. Yeah, you can do it, but like the Monster Manual doesn't provide you with the variety.
No, exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Like, fiends wouldn't work. Like, I'm thinking like,
no, of course. I mean,
what
if you
factions
homebrew,
would work? Yeah, but what factions would work? It's like basically undead.
And I mean, undead.
Maybe elementals
as written, undead. Yeah, elementals. Elementals are not very. I don't think elementals. Okay, elementals can carry only a campaign if they have cultists.
Yeah.
And all that. I mean, undead cultists also exist, but like you have enough variety in the undead category.
But elementals need the extra filler to get there, to get over. And
like, I don't think that like we need every group to be designed like undead.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you want a plant, like if you want to basically offer me the possibility of having like the little blights
mm-hmm.
and then move up to the stronger blight and then move up to the boss blight, I should be able to run that within a campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like. It's just something I would like to see, right? Like when we were talking earlier about what do you want from a monster manual?
Mm-hmm.
What I want from a monster manual is enough flavor text to inspire me, factions that can carry a campaign on their own, mm-hmm. factions that have different roles, different combat roles for the same monsters,
mm-hmm.
right? Like the orthogonal unit design, like you were talking about, and monsters that are dynamic and interesting to run, right? That surprise players. In particular, on that, I recognize this is a personal preference. Not all monsters can be like this. D&D isn't necessarily this kind of game, but I particularly like monsters where there's a trick you got to figure out, right? I like monsters where it's like, oh, I get it. Every time they dive bomb, they make themselves vulnerable to X. Or, you know, oh, I get it. The more that we hit the minions, it powers up the big boss guy because he like harvests the souls every time the minion dies.
Yeah, that's such a gamer take, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, talking about all these positive traits that you just...
You say that's such a gamer take,
Yeah.
but are video games not fun?
Yeah.
So, I mean... You know,
yeah. Anyway, talking about all of these positive things that you listed that you want in a faction. Modrons.
Let's talk about Modrons. So I'm going to read you guys the Modron Monodrone, all right? It's got an AC of 15, 5 hit points.
15?
Yeah, 15.
That's so high.
5 hit points. It has a trait called Disintegration. Side note, side pet peeve. Monsters have really long traits in this book that don't really matter. Like the demons have like every single demon has like a 3-paragraph trait. I'm exaggerating, but every demon has like a 3-paragraph trait that amounts to when you kill this thing, it respawns in hell and it'll come back. And it's like, it takes up so much space on all of these stat blocks.
Put it in the blurb of the monster. Like, if the dungeon master cares about it.
Exactly. It's like canonically, there might not even be a hell in this setting. You know, like this is like fully a feature that might not matter. And the stat block should really have the quintessence of what you need for combat.
It's so setting specific.
All right. So Modrons disintegrate when they die, leaving behind anything it was wearing or carrying. This is a trait completely irrelevant to combat, but it's a trait that it has.
So you can't loot them.
No, it leaves behind anything it was wearing or carrying.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they're lootable.
Okay, but you can't like loot them from metal for their own bodies.
You can't cut out their eye and like hang it on your mantelpiece. What relevance? Why this? Okay, but anyways, all right. AC 15, hit points 5, disintegration trait. It can attack.
And it can throw something.
And it can throw. It can attack with its gear, and then it can fling its gear.
By the way, right, this is the Modron.
Wait. This is the Modron Monodrone. All right, now the Modron Duodrone. Has an AC of 15, might sound familiar to you. Has 11 hit points.
So high?
Has 11 hit points. Disintegration. It can make 2 attacks, and it attacks with its clockwork blade.
Does it throw something?
So there's like a 95%... No, it doesn't throw anything. So there's like a 90% overlap between these two stat blocks. But let's go to the Modron Tridrone. The Modron Tridrone has an AC of 15. Have you heard that anywhere before? It's got 16 hit points. That's almost 3 times as much as 5. It's got the disintegration trait, and it can attack 3 times with its clockwork spear. The Modron Quadrone has an AC of 16. Oh, something's changed. Has 22 hit points, which is almost 5 times, which is almost 4 times as much.
16 is 4 squared.
It has 22 hit points, which is almost 4 times as much as the 5 of the Monodrone. It has the disintegration trait. It has multi-attack. It can attack 4 times with its slam, and this one has a gear launcher again. So it can also do it at range.
This gear launcher is weaker than the Monodrone's gear launcher.
That's funny. Well, that's because Monodrone isn't making 4 attacks.
Yeah, I know. I know that. But
and then the Modron Pentadrome, stop me if you've heard this before, has an AC of 16, 32 hit points. The disintegration trait can multi-attack, attacking 5 different times, and it's got a slam, an electrical discharge, and finally, a feature none of the other ones have, which is a paralysis gas, which is a rechargeable 5/6 ability it can use. So I just want to be clear with you guys that this is 1, 2, 3 pages of content with 5 different stat blocks, each stat block overlapping with the previous to like 90%. It's like literally nothing else is changing about these monsters.
This could be one of those summon creature stat blocks.
From Tasha's.
Exactly, where just like N equal Greek prefix for number.
Yeah.
And then N is like the variable for everything.
Exactly. Like it's like
you can make infinite.
They all have true sight of 120 feet. They all have a passive perception of 10, except for the last 2, which have 12 and 14. But you know what I mean? They're all immune to the charm condition. And then they have like slightly different stat block arrays. Like the Duodrone has a charisma of 7 instead of a charisma of 5, which is what the Monodrone has. The Tridrone has a charisma of 9. The Quadrone has a charisma of 11. And the Pentadrone has a charisma of 13. But like generally, this is 5 different versions of cumin in your spice cabinet. Like none of these
increasingly large bottles of cumin.
Exactly. Like you can't build an adventure around these. You can't build a campaign around these.
Absolutely not.
They're like you can use the mono, duo, and tridrone together.
You can hardly build an encounter around. Like you can hardly build more than 1 encounter around these that is not the same encounter.
And I think Modrons could be interesting. You're not bound by human biology. They come from the plane of law. They look like robots. Like that is a deep aesthetic vein, and I'm sure there's many designs you could make for them. So the fact that they're so predictable and lame that they could be 1 stat block like in the Tasha's summoning things, is just like, why do these take up 3 pages? And then like kobolds take up one page.
But maybe it's a deep thematic topic thing about the order of the world. And
yeah, exactly. Every campaign needs Modrons. I want to highlight that again for the listeners. There are more Modron stat blocks by a factor of 2.5. There are more pages of Modron by a factor of 3 than there are kobolds in this monster manual.
Oh my god, no.
And as I just read to you, the Modrons all kind of suck. Like, none of them, they just have multi-attack. None of them have any interesting features or bonus actions or reactions or rechargeable abilities, except for, yes, the last one, the Pentadrone, does have the knockout gas.
Can you imagine being trapped in this adventure? And just like fighting monodrones and duodrones first. And then being like, that was kind of basic, but it was the first encounter.
Yeah.
And then a new drone shows up, and you're like, oh boy,
this is the tri-drone? What does it do?
And like every time a new one shows up,
I would just be like, is this like No Man's Sky? Like, this is like the procedurally generated adventure. I was like, No Man's Sky on release, by the way, for all the No Man's Sky stands in this chat.
It got better. It got better.
Yes, it got better. But you know what I mean? It's like I would feel like I was playing a procedurally generated adventure.
That's the game that a Modron would run.
Exactly.
It'd be like, and the next enemy is slightly stronger than the first one. Right?
And it's like, yeah. So,
by the way, for those who don't know, the Modrons are tiny robots who are kind of goofy. They're the force of order in the universe. They have a big organic eye, even though their bodies are robotic, and thick, luscious, supple lips.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. They have weird faces. Okay, so one thing I want to point out again as another thing I want to point out as negative at one point is
Can I bring up something positive just so we have a little bit of a rhythm?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoy how the art in this book is made.
The art is phenomenal.
Yeah, the player's handbook doesn't always have the best art. I find the player's handbook's like main art for like classes, subclasses, and lineages tends to be on point. But then when we have like a spell, piece of art to show a spell, sometimes the art will just be kind of like feel like standard. I don't want to use the word corporate because it's not that, but it feels a bit like flat and uninspired. Uninspired is a good word.
Yeah, it's just like light blast.
Yeah, except it's light blast, and there's a generic fantasy hero doing light blast, and sometimes it really feels like the soul is missing. Like there is that one summon fae spell where someone summons a fae, and the fae is like a big muscular pink fairy, clad in leather armor, and is like the juice is missing. There is no flavor.
Yeah. It's just like, it looks kind of like this name of the spell that's being illustrated is like Fairy Launcher.
Exactly.
Like, the fairy is like barreling like a cannon towards this thing. And I don't know. It's just like, it doesn't really, it's not that a fairy can't be muscular. It's just that like, there's just not a lot there. There's not a lot interesting there. The fairy just doesn't look very interesting. The situation doesn't look very interesting. It's like, oh, here's a marrow. They're summoning a fairy. The fairy's attacking the marrow.
I feel like, you aren't giving me the fairy the way the fairy is supposed to looks in my brain, and you aren't giving me a reason to find that this departure from the style is worth it. Yeah,
like you could do 2 alternative pitches that I don't know are far better, but they come to mind is big spirit fairy, and everyone's intimidated by it, and it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of funny, right? That the fairy is, different than normal. Or how about a scene where we see the summoned fairy flying in from behind through a window or something, through cover, right? Surprising the bad guys. It's the idea is, oh, I'm the caster, I'm down here, I can't get to them, but you know who can? My cool mobile fairy summon.
Right? Yeah, or like you want a combat fairy? Make the fairy more insect-like, chitinous. Give her an exoskeleton.
Of course, that's your suggestion.
Yeah, but that's how you.
That's how you make things cool. You turn them into bugs. Yeah, guys, don't you know? That's how.
But
it works.
It's a natural Fey-inspired way to give a fairy armor and a weapon that feels still Fey. It's like
it feels natural, right?
It's a beetle.
You could do a summon Fey where you summon like what feels kind of like an elven paladin, like a sylvan paladin or something like that, And it's like with like the classic leaf armor or whatever, you could do like a more combat oriented, but then like still true to form twist.
Yeah. So anyway, what this monster manual instead has so many different styles.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really works, because not every artwork
and backgrounds, which
and-
is relevant.
yeah,
Actually,
background.
it makes it look much better. You have context to put these monsters.
Yeah, you
in.
have context, absolutely. The monster isn't just standing there. Most of them are performing some kind of cool action, and it's showing you what the monster is supposed to feel like. The art style complements the monster. Like the gibbering mouther
Yeah.
illustration is fantastic. The Minotaur illustration is fantastic. The angels feel like angels, and when you have a horror monster, it feels like a horror monster. And like that's
The
so
helmed
great.
horror, for example,
The helmed horror
I
looks
think looks
badass.
really cool. One of the things I just want to throw in at the side is like the helmed horror stat block is another one that I'll like never use, and it's something I find disappointing. Right, the art is so cool, and then you look at the stat block, and it's like this thing has multi attack and it's resistant to magic,
Yeah.
and that's the whole thing, and it's like a CR7, I think, stat block. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
like this isn't like first session we're fighting kobolds, right? It's like this thing could have the complexity and power budget to be like
Yeah.
truly interesting.
But it's not.
Yeah, sorry, it's not CR7, it is CR4, right?
But still,
But it's like it's got magic resistance, spell immunity, it attacks twice.
does it have
That's
a
the
frightening
whole-
aura?
No.
It's called a horror. It should
Hey,
have
it's a horror
frightening-
that's not scary.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly.
And it's like the art is just like, whoa, this thing looks like it will fucking like shoot you with lightning and rip your
looks like
guts out.
it looks like Darth Vader. It looks like
Yeah.
the Rogue One Darth Vader
Right.
corridor scene, and then
So hey, praise the art, right?
praise the art.
But
praise the art.
but the stat blocks sometimes do disappoint what the
Yeah.
art promises you.
Yeah, and like the dragons did a really good job. I think the dragons look a lot more distinct and have more personality. The black
Yeah.
dragon is a standout in this category. Also,
In terms of improvement as well, because I feel like the black dragon before was very like generic evil for evil's
I liked
sake.
it. Yeah, I mean, I liked that it had. I liked the horns.
Yeah, the horns
The
were
horns were distinctive, but yeah, and
cool. The green dragon art I think is great. It
Yeah.
shows it hiding and sneaking.
yeah,
The ancient green dragon art shows it manipulating and scheming, right? It's not all. So it gives you really the feeling that the different types of dragon are not just different in terms of energy type,
yeah,
but they're actually different in what they do. So
Yeah.
the art is really
Yeah.
good. I particularly like the I think it's the bronze dragon art.
Yeah.
The ancient bronze dragon that has like is basically like babysitting a whole bunch of baby dragons. I thought it was really
Yeah,
cute
so
and
cute.
was great, and shows you how a bronze dragon is different from a brass dragon, which are easy to confuse, but once you've seen the brass dragon art, you're like, okay, you're a guardian of the sea, and like the sonic wave over shooting through the air as you fly over
yeah,
the
mighty
seas.
warrior.
And then the bronze dragon you see is like, like doing the magic school bus with a whole bunch of little wormlings, and you're like, oh, I get it. I see how they're different.
Yeah, and final thing on the art.
Mhm.
Like, I don't like all the art,
Mhm.
but I like that the art style is rich enough that like everyone will find a piece of art that they don't enjoy here, but like there's so much more is gained
Yeah.
through the different styles. I'm so happy about the art in this book. The one that I didn't like, I don't like the Beholder stat block, the Beholder art,
hmm
but it's too cartoony for me.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like half pissed off, half happy
hmm
that they nailed it so well on the cover art.
Yeah.
Because like at least I have a cool Beholder on the cover art, and
Yeah.
at the same time, you knew how to make this cool. Why is this here?
I think it's because Beholders, I think maybe it's just like they decided to go for a more cartoony vibe for the art of the Beholder, because the Beholder is kind of a cartoony villain. They're very much like silly, mad titan, like silly, mad tyrants who are totally up their own butt and think they're the most special thing ever. Right,
I've
like-
seen Xanathar, like art of the Beholder Xanathar,
Yeah.
that is kind of like more goofy, it's colorful, it's not a scary monster, it's like conspiring around
Yeah.
like with the normal people as if he was like some fucking like
Mm.
Game of Thrones Lord Varys.
Yeah.
But like I like that. And I don't know exactly, I can't put exactly my finger on it. I like that and I don't like this.
Yeah.
So yes, to
I just think
cartoony-
that's maybe what they were going for. But yeah, if it didn't land for you, I mean, that's the thing, right? Not all art is going to land. You're never going to have a book where you're like, every single piece in here is amazing.
But that's not a problem because so many are amazing.
Yeah, and it's like on average, the art in here is interesting and cool and will help inspire you, which is part of what you want.
So
can I talk about my-
Yeah, no, yeah,
right.
like now you can back to the negative, back to being toxic.
Here's my negative. one of the stat blocks I want to highlight, because it's a type of stat block you see over and over in this book, and it's like the Modron. It makes me think there's like about 5 pages of this in this book that didn't need to be here.
We're talking about Sladdy, aren't we?
We're talking about the Slad Tadpole specifically. The Slad Tadpole has an AC of 12. It has 7 hit points. It has magic resistance, and it has a bite attack where it has a +4 to hit, and it deals 1d6 plus 2 piercing damage. This stat block is effectively useless. I could homebrew this stat block easily.
Yes.
I think anyone could homebrew this stat block easily. If you're running Slod for the party, you're experienced enough to do D&D that you could easily create a Slod Tadpole stat block.
Yes.
The stat block is very close to what I call the make something up stat block, which is like, it's got about an AC a little higher than 10, and it's got hit points of, we'll call it 10, and to hit, it's got like a plus, I don't know, 3, 4, and when it deals damage, it's like 1d4 plus 3, or 1d6 plus 2, or something like that, you know what I mean? It's like the stat block you would make up if on the spot you had to make up a stat block for something weak, you know? Yeah. There's nothing interesting. There's just like literally nothing interesting about this stat block in terms of like, it doesn't inspire you to run anything.
I have improvised better stat blocks than this. Like, yeah. I have improvised bonus stat blocks that have a bonus action.
So another stat block like this is the larvae stat block. Larvae are like a type of fiend that you find on Hades, like people who were bad in life.
Stage. It's like the first stage
of demon or devilhood. LM, right? All right. Let me figure this out for a second.
Yeah, larvae. I don't know what we're talking. Like,
here we go. Larva. A larva has an AC of 9. It's got 9 hit points. It has a +1 to hit. It deals 1d4 minus 1.
The art is sick.
And I just like, what about this? Why would I ever want to run this for a party? What party would I want to run? It's first off, it's a CR0 monster, which means it's recommended for no party. I don't know. I don't know.
How much XP is it?
10.
10.
You're never gonna level up from this thing. It's like
if you stack enough of these.
It's like window dressing stat blocks. Yeah, right?
At least there's the swarm. Like the swarm. I also got there and I looked at the larva and immediately skipped it and I saw there was a swarm of larva and I said, okay.
Yeah.
The swarm of larva.
I like that. There's more swarms in this monster manual than there were before, and like proper swarms of monsters, not just swarms of like animals. I think that's really cool, and it adds a great way to be like, I would like to see it almost for most things, right? Like, it'd be fun to run a swarm of goblins against a 5th level party, or to run like a swarm of bugbears against like a 7th level party.
I mean, in Edge of Extinction, we saw how at some point, if you want to have these large encounters with like kind of like clashes of civilizations, where you have like two armies fighting each other. You know, the siege of the goblins. You can either pull it off with swarms of goblins, or you can pull it off with a ridiculously small amount of goblins.
Yeah.
That won't feel like a siege. It will feel like maybe like an attack.
One of the places in the book where the art doesn't line up with what you're given is the skeleton section. They show a fight between 3 heroes and hundreds of skeletons. But there is no skeleton swarm. So you can't pull off that scene, right? You can by giving yourself a whole bunch of headaches as a DM.
And giving your players a whole bunch
But a swarm of zombies or a swarm of skeletons is, I feel, iconic enough that it might have warranted an inclusion over another Slod Tadpole stat block or another larvae stat block. Like these stat blocks...
How about the hexadrone?
Yeah, exactly. How about another? Best I can do is another hexadrone. That's another Modron. Yeah, so like these stat blocks, like I'm not going to say they have zero utility, but I feel that they have such small utility that you generally don't need them. Cost. And the opportunity cost of instead not having extra swarms or extra CRs of monsters weakens the book.
Yeah.
But there's also another positive thing I want to point out, for example, is the half-dragon. The half-dragon now has a very simple bonus action that lets them spend 10 feet of movement to jump 30 feet. It is super simple. It is not at all extra cognitive load, but it'll mean that your half-dragons get tied down a little bit less in combat. They have a little bit more flexibility and utility, and you just get to do one extra fun thing. So that on your turn, you're not just moving and attacking twice. You're moving, jumping, and attacking twice. And I believe the half-dragon even has a breath weapon or something like that. That makes them a little bit more interesting on top of that already.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the kind of stat block I was hoping for Yeah, they have it. They have a breath weapon. So and by the way, just to prove that they can do this, there is not 20 different half dragon stat blocks, one for every single color of dragon.
What?
Instead, there's just one trait called Draconic Origin that says the draconic origin of this creature basically determines the damage of its breath weapon, either acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison. So, like, they can do it, and they do it with the half dragon. And I think the half dragon is a decent CR5 stat block. It's like it could be more complicated, but like the bonus action is just a little bit of niceness that makes them just a little bit more interesting.
We talked about the art and we talked about the half dragon. Let's talk about how did we improve on the dragons.
So the old dragons in the 2014 Monster Manual, as we said, were very samey. The main difference between like high-level dragons was in their layer actions. The new dragons instead differentiate each other at high levels, at least, in terms of their spell casting.
Yes.
And in terms of their legendary actions. We read through some of them. We thought they were pretty cool. There's the Black Dragon legendary action. You sick a swarm of bugs on a caster, and they have disadvantage on their concentration checks.
Yeah.
And, of course, they take damage, which is a nice combination. You get them to take damage when they have the negative on concentration checks.
Yeah, and finally, the dragons are spellcasters. High-level dragons are spellcasters.
That used to be an optional rule. Now it's just like it's in all the stat blocks.
And they have flavorful spells at will. And
like
flavorful spells.
The fear on the Black Dragon I thought was really cool. The Blue Dragon had like a lot of invisibility and like hiding stuff. Yeah, scrying, which is good for a leader, right? For like a tyrant type. There's also one change to legendary actions that was made, and legendary resistances. Like now when a creature is in its lair, it doesn't get lair actions. It just gets +1 legendary resistance and +1 legendary action, which is a cool way to have like a more flexible, it's better as a CR22 creature in my campaign, or it's better as a CR21 creature in my campaign. It's very easy to balance. Obviously the flavor of lair actions was kind of cool, so not having those anymore is too bad, but legendary actions have also changed now. Yes. Every legendary action costs 1 legendary action, and if one is stronger than the rest, it normally says you can only use this one once a turn, and then or once a round, and then that kind of naturally handles itself. So I think legendary actions have been conceptually improved without scrapping them, which is what I think a lot of people thought was going to happen.
Said that you get more legendary actions if you're in the layer.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you're mistaken. I think that's legendary resistances.
No, they get 1 extra resistance and 1 extra legendary action.
Both?
They get both. They get both. Which is cool.
That's cool. I think,
So it's basically just like giving them a little bit extra hit points, a little bit extra damage. That's how you get to the next CR,
I do miss a little bit, not the layer actions, but the description of like regional effects.
Those are still in here.
They're still in there?
I almost knocked over a glass, you guys. Yes, I believe those are still in
glass.
Here. So,
let's check.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly check here. Yeah, gold dragon layers. Gold dragons make their home in places of natural and magical wonder. The region containing an adult or ancient gold dragon's layers alters by its presence, creating the following effects. There's like a dream messenger. There's a foretelling fog. So there's like... They still have those environmental effects, which
I like
is cool.
these. Yeah, I like these because to be honest, I would make them only apply to an ancient dragon. Yeah. Not that that matters anyways.
The thing is, what if your campaign's just not going that high,
Yeah, of course. But I like the idea that at some point the dragon becomes, the dragons are innately magical and divine to a certain degree. Yeah. And at some point they start warping their environment around them. It's a trait that they share with the, what are the demigods?
Empyreans?
Yeah, the Empyreans. In the lore of the Empyreans, just for you to know, is basically a pupating god in a semi-mortal body that walks the planet until it's ready to hatch into a full god. And in their lore, there's stuff their mood affects the weather around them.
For you mammals out there, it's kind of like saying Empyreans are infant gods who are growing and developing before they reach adulthood and then become full gods,
And for you reptiles out there, imagine a young lizard who has to grow, but their skin doesn't grow with them, so they have to shed the Empyrean. They molt the Empyrean off to become a true god.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the geckos in our audience.
Yeah, just because you said pupating, I thought that was so funny.
Bugs are cool.
Yeah, but what's going to be more relatable to a bunch of humans than the idea of growing up? The concept of a bug pupating.
Yeah, but I think that the change from Empyrean to god is more similar to worm through chrysalis to butterfly than from tiny human to bigger human with a smaller head proportionally.
I don't know. I feel like relative to like a squad of 10 infants, they're Empyreans and I'm a god. I think that kind of works. Like in terms of like combat stats, I think the analogy works.
I don't know. I think 10 6-year-olds could take you.
10 6-year-olds? Yeah, probably.
And a caterpillar just cannot fly.
It's true. It has the Tarrasque problem. Like, caterpillar just, always gets taken down by the butterfly, no matter how big it is.
The butterfly just needs a bow. A magical bow.
But yeah, so the dragons are not as different as they could be, right? It's not like, whoa, this dragon is going to be completely different than this other one. If you probably could get away with running like one or two.
You know how you're going to defeat the 10 6-year-olds?
What?
Every hit needs to be a kill shot.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so like dragons, like high level dragons, you could maybe run 2 for the same party. At that point, you're going to have to start homebrewing. They just get too samey after that.
Yeah, or
but
you combine them.
But at least they're not like completely the same with only different layer actions, which is kind of what they were before.
Or you combine them, an ancient blue dragon and an ancient green dragon at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your party can take that. They might not be able to handle that. One thing, actually, if you go and you look out at a few of those links that we said, legendary creatures are much stronger on average than normal creatures, because the idea is that you run legendary creatures solo. So it's kind of implicit and hidden in the rules, but legendary creatures should only really be run solo or with minor assistance. Multiple legendary creatures together, it's kind of a recipe for trouble in this edition. And they don't really tell you that, but it's implicit in the numbers. So
yeah, maybe you can have them share a legendary action pool.
Yeah, you could do some kind of homebrew like that. That sounds interesting. I like that idea. But yeah, so that's the dragons. I think basically, I was saying this earlier, I think D&D kind of has a legacy issue with dragons, where they made up a bunch of cool dragons that were only minorly different from one another, and now they have more cool dragons to make than they have cool dragon ideas. Yeah. Which is why the Wormling and Young Dragon stat blocks are basically identical but with higher numbers, and the Adult and Ancient are basically identical but with higher numbers, and then between colors they're like still 80% the same, and then like there's like a 20% distinguishing factor, or maybe even a 30% distinguishing factor. Like the percentage is a metaphor; it's not a literal gauge, but like. I think they have more, like, I think if they only had to design 5 different cool dragons, they would come up with more different and more interesting ideas, but they're like, God, I gotta make these 10 young and 10 ancient dragons. 20 legendary creatures. By the way, guys, like 90% of the legendary creatures in this book are young and ancient dragons of various colors.
Adult and ancient dragons.
Adult and ancient dragons of various colors, which are very samey, Yeah. Which is like, why couldn't we have a legendary... Like, couldn't we have more legendary fiends or elementals or something? You know what I mean? It's just like it's the legacy of having to have all 40 dragon stat blocks. Causes issues. But I don't know how you're feeling. I'm feeling pretty close to just calling it a day and going through our final conclusions. Do you still have any points you want to mention?
I have a pet peeve.
Okay.
I want to be petty.
Bring it up.
Well, okay. Quotas. First.
The fish people who make up their own gods. Yeah,
the fish people who make their own gods, and the gods are real.
Yeah.
You know how the...
Or they become real.
Yeah. The Gith are aberrations now?
Yeah, so this is something we haven't mentioned. They made a lot of changes. A lot of creatures that used to be humanoid no longer are. Goblins are fae. Lizard folks are elementals, if you can believe it. Gith are aberrations. Merfolk are also elementals. They've made a lot of changes in that regard. So the only humanoids in the whole book
are elementals.
Even Aarakocra are elementals, even though those were like a playable lineage that was humanoid back in the day.
You know who is...
Gnolls. Gnolls are fiends now. I agree with that, though.
Yeah, no, that's
I agree with that change. But so that means the only humanoids left in the book are the flexible ones. And all the other ones that, even though they look very humanoid, are no longer humanoid.
Yeah. So I was thinking, Quotas are aberrations. Yeah. Were they aberrations before?
No idea.
Because just like I was thinking, if they wanted an aberration people, the Quotois are perfect aberration people. They're just freaky enough. And in this art, they become more freaky. They remove the pupils from their faces, which made them look so dorky. And instead, now they have just like white eyes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Quotois, your basic Quotois has a spear a sticky net attack, and a sticky shield.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like very much like a grappling and restraining build. And then the Kotoa whip. And
Let me see the challenge ratings on these. We're like 1, 3,
3, and 1/4. They're perfectly acceptable. And then you do to go to the Archpriest 6. I think that's a perfectly good spread.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a Kotoa whip,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a Kotoa monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an artwork with a Kotoa with a whip and a Kotoa with a staff with like a grappling hook. Guess which one's the whip?
They've oriented them wrong, or the wrong way around.
Guess which one's the whip?
The whip is above the monitor stat block. Otherwise, you wouldn't be telling me about this.
No. Kotoa whip and Kotoa monitor lead a midnight raid. Kotoa whip attacks with a pincer staff. Kotoa monitor attacks with a whip.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Genuinely, that's crazy. So it's not that the art is in the wrong position. It's that the monitor attacks with a whip and the whip attacks with the staff. That's got to be an error. It wasn't in the errata. By the way, there was a day one errata for this book. Go check it out. Like, there's some major mistakes. Yeah. Like, oh, this thing can cast Cone of Cold once per day.
No, it's 2 per day.
And yeah, exactly. It changes like that. Where it's like, oh, this thing can cast twice per day. This thing can cast either Cone of Cold or Fear. And it's like, no. It can cast Cone of Cold and Fear each twice a day. Yeah. You know?
And like, I don't fully get like monitor what it's supposed to be like
it seems to me like a monitor lizard, but maybe it's supposed to be somebody who watches somebody else.
Yeah, directing their work.
Okay, they control the day-to-day
their
life.
worship. Yeah, and they control their work and worship. Archpriest bless monitors with the power to control their underlings and subdue foes with electricity channels through their bizarre whips. No. Yeah. The whip is the way. It's not a mistake in the stat block. It's a mistake in the minds.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, these aberrations are so twisted that they call themselves whips.
Are these slotty? Are these the chaos ones?
Exactly.
Are these slotty?
Yeah, insane. So I mean, I don't have huge issues with the faction as a whole. Like the whip has a conjure slimy blob thing and a shield of faith.
Yeah.
And the monitor has the bone whip, which is a little more interesting than the base. Like, the base Kotoa really isn't necessary, but I guess they felt they need to have them. But these two, whip and monitor, are perfectly good units, and then the Archpriest makes for a good...
Yeah.
Like, see, this CR6 Archpriest, this is like what the bandit boss should be to me. Like, this is what we're looking for.
Right. It's enough within the range that you could play it with the others, and it feels like one cohesive faction that could carry a small adventure or a short something.
Exactly. Now, Now, the monitor wields the whip, and the whip doesn't, and that is insane.
That part's weird.
That was my pet peeve that I wanted to, like...
One thing I do want to mention, coming off of Draw Steel and the Draw Steel playtest, right, is that the Monster Manual suffers from space constraints. This Monster Manual has 50 more stat blocks and correspondingly less lore. Some of the formatting changes they made make these stat blocks smaller and allow us to fit more in, which is a good thing, and I applaud that. But the unnecessary complication of stat blocks and of the game of D&D makes these stat blocks longer than they are, for example, in Draw Steel, a game I would say is of comparative complexity, which means that you can fit way less stat blocks in. This bad boy, this book, has 502 stat blocks in it. I know this because I counted it and I made a CSV. CSV is in the description. You can use it for like Cobalt Fight Club, or if you use anything like that and you want to import it quickly. But the point I'm trying to make is one of the advantages a game like Draw Steel has is they can fit like 8 stat blocks on a single page. So if their stat blocks are, say, let's just say, I don't know, the math is easy. Let's say they're 80% shorter, right? They're probably let's say they're 20% shorter or 60% shorter, right? For every 20% shorter that your stat block is than the average D&D stat block, you can fit 100 extra stat blocks into your book. And Draw Steel only goes from levels 1 to 10. And the range of power is narrower in that game intentionally than it is in this game, which means you'll need to cover less different challenge ratings. So automatically, there's like structural things you can do editing about your game to improve the number of stat blocks, applicable stat blocks you have at every moment in your campaign. That I think this book suffers from. But anyways, final thoughts, conclusions.
Do you have any final pet peeves, like my Kotoa whip thing?
No.
All right. Final conclusions. I'm gonna keep homebrewing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I might borrow this from you.
Yeah.
I might borrow this from you to check it out, but I don't see myself buying this book because I will not consult it often enough for the price to be worth it. Honestly,
Plus, you have a friend to borrow it from.
I have a friend to borrow it from, and also I enjoy my monsters homebrewed.
Yeah. I would say that if you are not playing D&D once a week or extremely regularly twice a week, like you never miss a session, but it is only twice a week, it is not worth it for you to get this book because it is an upgrade over the old Monster Manual. I would say on average, I haven't found a stat block yet where I'm like, this is worse than the 2014 version, right? So I would say the increase over baseline
That would
varies
be hard to pull
between. Yeah, I know, right? We stripped out the multi-attack. Now it's just one attack. It's even less for you to do on
The
a turn.
bar is in the competitive category.
But like I would say the bonus on the average stat block simply varies. Some stat blocks are like 0% better, essentially the same thing, and some stat blocks are like 80% better, like a lot better and a lot more interesting. And I think the average falls somewhere around 30 or 40-ish, right? They feel like meaningfully better enough of the time that it's worth it to buy if you play the game very consistently and you use this book a lot. And especially if you're like me and you just want to pull a monster off a page. If you want to homebrew all your own monsters, like especially then, I don't think this book is worth it. So I would say it's the same recommendation I also have for the Player's Handbook. If you play this game very regularly and you get a lot out of it, and you want to use these monsters as is, then I would say this book is worth a buy and will be fun inspiration and you'll enjoy reading it. However, if you only play like once a month or you don't play D&D very much anymore, you're on to other TTRPGs, or if you tend to homebrew your own monsters anyways, then you probably don't need this and you can easily give it a skip.
Yeah.
For me, I feel this is probably going to be the last D&D book that I buy. I just feel like over time I've gotten tired of D&D. I'm on to other games, but I am still glad that I bought this. I immediately felt the improvements. I've already built one fight with this where I picked out a cool monster that you guys are going to face on Saturday. So there are cool things in here, but actually this is a big but. If you're anything like us and you agree with our opinions so far on this podcast and you don't own Flea Mortals yet, you obviously have to get that first, right? So
yeah, I was actually going to kind of like jokingly, that would be my plug.
Yeah.
While the entire episode has been the plug for Free Mortals.
Yeah.
But like as someone who has
Free Mortals? That's
Free Mortals.
That's the sequel. That's the one you pirate is Free Mortals. No, Flea Mortals.
Flea Mortals. Yeah. As someone who has rarely used Flea Mortal monsters.
Yeah.
I still am very happy to own that book, and I regularly consult it, or I used to regularly consult it when I was the dungeon master.
Yeah.
For Age of Extinction, it's a product worth buying, even if, like,
it's literally also, by the way, literally cheaper than the new Monster Manual.
I would almost dare to say, even if you don't run D&D as your main game, it's just like good game design, and it's inspiring. Like you can read through Flea Mortals and learn something.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think the order of operations that you should purchase, if you are a total newbie, no, because there's monsters in the free rules. So, order of operations of purchase, if you're interested in complicated monsters and running interesting tactical monsters, buy Flea Mortals first and use the basic rules to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
If then at that point you're not satisfied and you already own the 2014 rules, then nothing to do. I think, in my opinion, unless you're really playing regularly and you want the top tier experience, this is like one of your main hobbies. Instead of playing Magic the Gathering, you play D&D. Then yeah, okay, you can shell out if this is one of your main hobbies. Obviously, you can shell out and you can buy the big book. But that would be the order of operations. I would say is like use the free rules with Flea Mortals, use the free rules with Flea Mortals, and then this book, right? That's sort of the operation I would go through.
Yeah.
But I'm happy I have it. I'm excited to use it. I was excited to talk about it, obviously. We got to talk about it for a whole hour. But I would say that we're getting towards the end. So do you have any plugs?
I have an anti-plug.
Okay, what's your anti-plug?
I often talk about the good board games that I play at my board game club.
Yes.
This time I played a bad game.
Terra Mystica.
Terra Mystica, made by someone who thought that Catan was a bit too for casuals and wanted something more interesting, which I understand as a drive. And when I saw this Terra Mystica, I was like, oh, it looks like Catan, but there's more.
It's kind of funny because from what you told me, it sounds a little bit like Terraforming Mars, which is supposed to be a really fun game, but I haven't played it yet.
Well, I mean, you can also take it like that. But yeah, it's resource management, it's terraforming, and it's expanding your settlements. There is no combat. Anyway, it's kind of like everything that you get from Catan, but more.
Yeah.
And it's awful. It's awful because the games are layered on top of each other with very little clever design and efficiency.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I once praised Scythe on this game for being a game that looks complicated and attracts the kind of player who wants a complicated game, but then actually was fairly quick to learn, understand, and still achieved a lot of depth with simple mechanics. And Terra Mystica does not do any of that. There is no elegance. There is just more rules stacked on top of rules to learn, exceptions. We kept forgetting stuff.
Yeah.
It was not a pleasant experience overall. We didn't even have the time to finish it because we had to catch a bus. We ended up running like 80% of it, and then we counted the points.
Oh no!
Yeah,
what an unsatisfying ending.
It's okay, I won, but it still was. It's all that matters. No, it was not a good experience, and I do not recommend it. That's my anti-plug.
I'm gonna plug. I don't know what I should plug.
Rebel Moon.
No, not that. But if we're on cinema, I finished Breaking Bad recently. I already plugged it. I started watching Better Call Saul, and I thought it was pretty good. You definitely should not watch it before Breaking Bad. It's definitely a post-Breaking Bad thing, and it's like, it's good so far. But it's not, I don't know, I've watched all of Breaking Bad, now I'm watching this. I'm getting a little tired of being sad. So maybe I might watch something else soon, but I've been enjoying it so far. So.
Yeah, I heard very good things about it. I had her watch the first 2 or 3 episodes of Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
But much like you, I was fresh off Breaking Bad, and I was like, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
I want to, it's something that I want to get back.
This is good and compelling, but I am sad. And I don't want to be sad anymore.
Exactly. And I needed a break. And I will come back to it eventually. Yeah. But I hear good things.
Oh, but speaking of refreshers and sorbets, the other thing I was thinking about plugging is the NADPod, not another D&D podcast people. Mm-hmm. They're like also dropout college humor people. Mm-hmm. They have a new campaign that they just recently started with one of the longtime players DMing for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I found so far that it was really fun. A really great campaign so far. They've only done like 2 episodes, but
nice.
It's like what's great about it to me is it's not super polished. It's just like it's earnest and sincere and with great like descriptions of places that are clearly planned ahead of time.
But the production value is more normal, achievable.
Yeah, it's just like, like it knows it's a simple story. It knows it's just a simple, sincere story, but it's just at the moment it's literally go to the castle, get the rescued nobles out of there, right? Maybe the twist on the conventional trope.
Get the rescued nobles out of there. That sounds easy.
Sorry, rescue the nobles out of there. Yeah, the twist, if anything, is like the nobles went there looking for something instead of being kidnapped by Bowser or whatever, Yeah. But otherwise, it's like it's a simple, sincere narrative with like not all the like bells and whistles and extra expectations and you're so used to stories. I'm going to subvert this in 7 different ways and all this pressure and stuff. It's like simple and direct narrative done well, and I've really enjoyed that about it so far. It's been really refreshing. It's made me feel more confident about my game. Like, yeah, you can just do. Sometimes you could just do the classics and it works and it's great. You don't always have to put a hat on a hat on a hat and like stress yourself with all that. Anyways, long plug section this time, but that'll just about do it for our 21st episode of A Friendly Orbit. If you want more, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as youtube.com/@afriendlyorbit, where after half a year of production, perhaps things might be uploaded soon, or perhaps they might not be. We will never know.
We'll never know.
Well, actually, we probably will know at some point, but we don't now. And if you're feeling frisky, you can send us an email at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com.
All right, Ceres, I'll fight you on Saturday in your dungeons.
Yes.
And to all of our fellow beholders out there, See what I did there?
Yeah, I do. I do see what you did there.
We'll catch you out there amongst the stars.